All right. Go ahead and begin whenever you're ready.
Sure. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this session. My name is Wendy Hutchinson, and I am coming to you from the East Coast. So while you're finishing lunch, I'm getting ready for dinner. And I'll tell you a little bit more about where I am in a moment. If people would I just want to get an idea of what institutions you work at and what your primary roles are, so that I can maybe make some adjustments as we have this conversation about academics and athletics, that our conversation will really be grounded in community development, student development, and self-authorship. So if you wouldn't mind, just let me know where you're from and what you do. And we can do the chat as well. Okay, great. Thank you, Marcia. Or Marissa, I'm sorry. Student caseworker organization. Okay, great. Thank you. Please. Academic and career advisor. Awesome. Anybody else want to unmute? You are welcome to if you'd like to. Career development. Okay. So great. Thank you so much. It just gives me an idea of the variety of positions that each of you hold within your universities. Here is okay, great. Here is my information. And while I'm coming to you from a public urban high school, I will make the correlation as to how the information that I've gathered over the past 4 years really makes sense for higher ed as well. And again, my info is at the top. Some of the roles I play at this medium-sized urban high school: the director of student athlete development for boys basketball. I'm the athletic academic advisor for winter and spring sports. I'm the lead health educator. Sometimes I'm the assistant principal. I do a variety of things at this high school in Baltimore. So keeping that in mind, some of the information that I will relate to you is about my kids in Baltimore. But I'm really excited to be in your company. This is a very dynamic group, and I'm excited that we'll be able to have this conversation and to be able to share this information with you. This session will, again, provide you with information about a research project that I've recently completed. And I really was looking at what do high school students need to seamlessly transition into college. And that's how it really affects you, because I am creating some things that will help high school kids to be really great freshmen when they come to your institutions. And we want to address any questions and further the conversation. The quote I have on the left is a Malcolm X quote, and it says, children have a lesson adults should learn: to not be ashamed of failing, but to get up and try again. And that quote really is very meaningful for me, and you'll see why in the next couple of slides. So let me talk about this fellowship. So I was funded last summer to go and research athletic academic advising programs at mainly Division I colleges across the country. So I spent the summer going to these fabulous institutions and having really rich conversations about academic advising. And so I was gathering this information so that I could create a program that would help high school athletes and actually high school students to transition into post-secondary programs. And let me tell you the reason I really was excited about this program and really wanted to do this research. The school I teach at, it's a Baltimore City Public Schools. It's a big urban district. And a couple of years ago, they changed, the system changed the eligibility requirement. And now the kids had to have a 2.0, and they could potentially fail one class if they still got a 2.0. And so the basketball coaches came to me and said, "Can you look at our kids' grades because we're worried that they're not going to have a 2.0?" And while I know that means something to all of us, like how can you not have a 2.0? But our kids were really having a hard time getting a 2.0. So to make a long story short, I ended up joining the staff, the boys basketball coaching staff, as their academic advisor personally. I was just a volunteer, and I just worked with the boys with this one particular team. And let me tell you, it was so much work, and it grew into this really amazing, amazing project. So I'm going to share with you some of the results that I learned from talking to your colleagues at your institutions. And I'm sorry, I didn't say this, but if you have any questions, this is really informal, and you can certainly ask, whenever they come up. So that's not a problem. So one of the things about this research is, how is this relevant, and how is it relevant to you in the post-secondary schools? And, why ask these questions? So my I really just wanted to facilitate this transition for the high school kids to colleges, because the kids at my school were getting scholarships, and then they weren't accepting them, so they never came to your institutions, but your institutions were offering them scholarships. And I wanted to know why, and what we could do to make that to change that. And then some of our students would go to, they would accept their scholarships. They would go for a month. Some didn't even make it a week, because they didn't have the skills that was needed for them to transition to college. So that was also very, very alarming for me, as I'm sure it is for everybody. So my question, I had to narrow it down to one question. My question was, what are the characteristics and skills? What characteristics and skills do high school student athletes need to transition to college? And my sample was pretty big for the number of institutions I went to. I spoke to higher ed administrators, directors of academic advising centers, academic advisors. I spoke to some athletes. I spoke to some parents, coaches, department chairs in some schools that had degree programs for academic advisors, and to executive directors of organizations that are affiliated with academic advising. And I just have to say that I spoke to some of the most enthusiastic, amazing people, and the information they gave me was just so, so invaluable. And I just can't thank them enough. So after I asked this question and spent hours and hours talking with people about this particular question, the themes that I heard time and time again, and it didn't matter the institution, whether it was an urban institution, whether it was Division 1, Division 2. Also, it didn't matter for the athletes that I was talking to. It didn't matter where they went to school, and their parents. So it was really interesting that across the board, these themes were very much prevalent. These self-awareness, the kids needed self-awareness, self-advocacy, resilience. They needed to learn to build relationships. They needed to be willing to learn, and to kind of adapt to the institution that they were at. Needed some maturity, to have some skills, to make mature decisions, and some discipline. And so it was interesting, while I was working on this project, the themes that everybody was talking about were themes that I was really experiencing. So I thought that was really, that really made some of the things that I learned were really, really personal, because again, I was going through all of these things. The research was not easy. It's not easy to speak to Division 1 programs. So there were a whole bunch of obstacles that I had to overcome and really be resilient. And if there was anything that I personally took from all of this research, is definitely resilience. And so the implication of this research of these themes is that really high schools are not preparing student athletes to meet any of the rigor of college and athletics in so many different ways. For example, time management, um, um, ability to juggle their classes and to ask when they need help, and just that whole piece of it that we're really not preparing them to meet those demands. So the solution for me was to create a program based on this information that higher ed professionals gave me to create a program for high school athletes to help them make the transition. And so that is what I was charged with doing. And just I think we all know that there are definite gaps in high school education in terms of going to college. So the implications for higher ed for you guys, how will your colleges and universities respond to these first time student athletes, these first time freshmen, first time going to college, and in many cases, my students are first generation students. So a question I pose to you, some questions that I pose to you is, who's going to support my students and how will they be supported? What are your institutions doing and what changes would you like to see? So we can open that up for just a quick conversation if anybody has um, something they'd like to share that they've seen from their institutions or that you actually do in your role at your schools. And don't be shy. Okay, well, so maybe as we further on in the conversation, something will trigger and you'll remember and want to share with us. I know it's right after lunch, but to make our conversation really rich, some participation would be great. But the whole thing is that if my high school students are not prepared, it affects your institutions. And so again, that is the gap that I'm hoping to to close in on so that the kids will go and they'll be a part of your teams and your campus communities and share all the rich things that they have. Oops. All right. So from the research, I did look at some student development theory, and I'm sure you recognize some people. And again, founded in self-authorship and community development. So of course, Baxter, is all about self-authorship. And quite simply, I put self-authorship into, asking kids who they are today and who they want to be. And then bridging that gap, like completing activities and thinking about how do you get to be who you want to be. The 7 vectors, again, are of maturity. So, one of the themes was maturity. So the kids have got to, they've got to grow up a lot between high school and becoming a freshman at your institutions. So the interpersonal relationships, becoming more independent and having a purpose and having integrity with their purpose. And that goes into the theory of transition. And there are some anticipated things that happen as they transition to college, like for example, graduating from high school and being admitted into college. And then there's some unanticipated things that happen while they're in college. There might be a financial situation, or they might get hurt playing and not being able to play their sport, and that might affect their scholarship. kids, the workload that they have, it might not be manageable, or it might need some additional help to manage it. And then there are some non-event things, um, some things that are expected but then don't occur. And that's kind of where my students really are falling into. And that's getting a scholarship, but not knowing how to accept it, or not knowing how to get to the university, or not knowing how to plan to have enough money to go to college. So that was a really important one, um, for us at the high school level. And then, of course, the theory of challenge and support. You know, we have to challenge the kids and we have to support them, but it has to be at a level that they're capable of being successful at. So I don't know if there's anything else that any of you use, any of the other theoretical frameworks that you use that drives your work. But if you would, if there is something that you'd like to share with us, that would be great.
Hi, I'm
Hi,
Rhonda.
hi, Rhonda.
I teach at the University of Illinois at Springfield.
Hmm.
So I hope to move out on the West Coast sometime soon. So, but anyway, at my university, we, well, all of the athletes that are, since I'm in teacher ed, all of the athletes, I I have to complete a midterm progress report on
Mhm.
them. So their coaches do a pretty good job at keeping an eye on them. Um, However, really someone could get a student could move along further, like after, say, after the midterm report's been submitted, and maybe not turn in a few assignments. And if I don't report that, and the coach isn't keeping on top of every single athlete that they have, then they can kind of get lost with that.
Mhm.
Usually, most of my athletes do really well. This is the first semester that I've had to contact um, some of the coaches. And I don't know if it's just with everything that's going on or stress.
Mhm. Do you think it's post-COVID related?
Uh, Possibly, because a lot of students are saying that they are under a lot of stress. I know, you know, they're always busy, and school and work and activities, that it's stressful anyway. And then with the athletes, they have a lot also.
Mhm.
uh,
And,
with
and
them.
what you're describing is almost traditional advising, and of course eligibility is completely at the foundation of what we're doing with our athletes, because we want them to be eligible to play their sport. And so I took the whole student development theory, for the whole student. And so it's one thing with not making the grades, but we have to find out why. And that's where so much of this other um, social emotional stuff comes in, that the kids that I'm sending you, my high school kids that are not prepared to deal with all of that. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. But yes, definitely the traditional eligibility piece is really important, because obviously we have student athletes, so they have to make sure their grades are definitely acceptable before they play their sport. So thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have anything to add, or anything going on at your university? Okay, so I alluded to the fact that all of this is based in self-authorship, and self-authorship is something you've been discussing in post-secondary education for a long time. Um, Dr. Larry Roper, which many of you may recognize him, he is a former Oregon State University administrator and happens to be one of my very dear friends for a very long time. And he and I worked with a group to develop community. And although our group wasn't filled with complete athletes, it was an advanced placement group, but we still had to develop community so that the kids can get a sense of ownership into some of the things that we were asking of them. And so um, it's self-authorship is way more complex than we have time to delve into, but it's that process um, that an individual goes through to develop these skills, and we're gonna talk about the skills. So that they internally define a belief system and an identity, and this is a big deal for high school students and your college freshmen, because they've just entered into that quasi adult life, and now people are really asking them some serious questions about who they are and who they would like to be. And so as we go through these, we can also think of ourselves as professionals, and how we identify with some of these principles of student and community development theory. But quite simply, it's asking, how did I become who I am, and what do I believe? And I'm going to talk. I'm going to give you a chance to think about that after we go through each of the principles here. And then the second one is, are we able to integrate and articulate our values and our beliefs with conviction? Do we really believe what we believe? And can we stand up for what we believe? And can we tell people, what we believe? And as we do that, we're engaging young people in some very complex questions about their life and their identity and what possibilities their futures hold for them. So, we can ask them, what is their role as a student, as an athlete, as a campus community member? Um, and for us, I think of it as, what do I want my legacy to be? And that has been something that has really hit me quite hard with this research, because now my legacy is academics, and my legacy is um, having athletes eligible to play their sport and to grow into um, the next part of their life. So that really has become my particular legacy. Trusting the internal voice. Again, we're developing and we're helping young people to really trust what they think, to trust their gut. Um, this is the time in life when people are really asking a lot of them, and they have to really, really trust what they believe. And an example that really happened today is I have a young woman who is in the top 10 of her class. She's number 7, and she can't decide which school to go to, which college. She has 3 that are her top 3, and she really is struggling with which one she really wants to go to and which one will really benefit her. And she was part of the group that Dr. Roper and I worked with, and she is still really struggling. And so we had to go through and ask her some questions to get her to pick which place will really help her to blossom and grow. But this is the first major decision that she's really had to make in her life, and it's really interesting to watch. And it's kind of frustrating too, because in the back of my mind, I know what she should choose, but again, it's obviously not about me. So helping her to figure out where she'll be the happiest, get the best education, and be the best community member is really, really interesting. And so again, we have to be able to express and stand up for what our beliefs are, and to know what our reputation is. And I did say that my legacy at this middle, medium-sized urban high school is they know Miss Hutch will help them get their grades up, increase their GPA, and go to college and play their sport. So again, that has been my reputation. And because we created the position in basketball, many other sports are really, they really need the support of somebody for their athletes as well. And I was having a conversation with a group of colleagues, just a casual, first thing in the morning conversation. And it had a couple of the football coaches happened to have been in our conversation. And they're like, "Oh, we really need you. Can you help our football players?" And I said, I can't. I said, basketball is all year long and it's so much work keeping those 25 young men in order. And I said, but I'll be happy to find somebody who loves football as much as I love basketball. And so we continued to talk, and they were talking about some of the situations with my students. And one of the coaches just blurted out, he said, just know you cannot mess with Hutch's kids. And so that really, we all laughed, but it really meant something to me because that is my reputation. And my reputation is that you really can't mess with my kids. Even if they're wrong, we're going to figure out how to get them to be right. And so, again, for us also, what do we believe in and what are we going to stand up for? And I stand up for my kids when they're right and when they're wrong, and I stand with them. So just for us to think about our own professional growth as well, because while we're helping young people to grow, I have grown so much by doing this work. And I think it's that relationship that makes it so good for the kids and for us as professionals. And so what we want to do is navigate towards meaning and fulfillment, fulfilling situations and life and careers, and for the kids going to college. We want to be fulfilled. I love coming to work, and I want to continue to love coming to work. Um, I want the kids to love going to college. I want them to just be so excited and have a really good experience and to really work hard. So we have to keep that in mind. And so we have to also, look at our lives in relation in context to our relationship with other people, and the communities that we're also in. So cultivating positive relationships, and we stress with the kids that while they are in high school, they might not like everybody and they might not get along with everybody that they come in contact with. But at some point, they're going to need people. And so we really help them to develop relationships with the people that they're closest to in school. And that does transfer when they come to your institutions, because one of the themes that people were saying is that they want the students to have relationships with their professors and with the campus community. So I think that's one of the ways that we're intertwined as well. And then finally, to engage in future focused activities. So we've answered all these questions and we've thought about ourselves and where we're going and how we're going to get there. But then we have to work towards things to help us get there, to actually get us a future, so to speak. And so for high school students who are transitioning to college, some of the things that they're going to have to work on: time management, decision making, mature decisions, and some financial situations that we find young people can get caught, short in not being able to know how to be financially responsible. So all of this to say, we ask two simple questions: who are you today, and who do you want to be in the future? And And I think if we ask this more often of young people, I think that the decisions they make will be concrete, and they'll be very intentional, and they'll end up doing things that they really want to do, and not the things that their parents want them to do, or that their teachers want them to do, or that other people want them to do, which again shows that transition to a more mature way of dealing with life. So back to number one. This is an activity that we did with the kids, and so we do with the student athletes. And I'd like for you to just think about this for yourself, um, to reflect on your career, and how did you become who you are today, and what are some things that influenced you in your career. Again, this is a short version list, not a complete list, but these are some things that may have affected us in our professional lives. So if anybody would like to put anything in the chat, or like to unmute themselves and maybe talk about something that really affected how you became the professional that you are, or that you would like to be. Okay, shy group. um, and sometimes it's really hard to pick one of them. I know for me, it's really hard to pick one. But from the chat, mentors. So interesting. So watching maybe somebody else, and I don't want to speak for you. So if you want to put more, or talk more about your experience. Another person put family and social class. Okay, so our values and how we grew up has some influence on how we become who we are. And again, I don't want to speak for anybody. Oh, I think we're getting somebody brave.
I'm happy to elaborate on what I on what I
Sure.
meant
Awesome.
when I said mentors. I mean, I agree with all of these 7 that you have here. I mean, I think all of those things very much influenced sort of, who I became. And when I work with, I do a lot of career advising, and when I work with students, these are a lot of the things that I ask them to talk about. But oftentimes, for my own self and for the students that I work with, if they've had a significant teacher or a class that they've taken, or just a really close relationship with somebody who's inspired them, I would say that tends to, that gets really intertwined with social class, right? Because who you're exposed to is going to be connected to all of these other things, demographically speaking. But anyway, that's something that I think comes up both for myself and for the students that I work with.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Does anybody else have anything? I think it's really hard to answer, or to say that all of those things don't affect us altogether. I just look at myself. I think all of those. I have a story about all of those that has helped me to become the educator, the professional that I am today. And I think one of the really interesting things is, when I worked with this group of students, when I shared some of my stories, they were surprised. And so they were surprised at how it took me a long time to get to college, because they see me now and they're like, oh, Ms. Hutch must have been a 4.0 student. Oh yeah, no, it took a lot of work to get to college, and I struggled with many of the things that they struggled with. So this is a really great ice breaking activity to get your groups thinking, and to get the athletes thinking about their lives and what they experience and how that may or may not influence their future. Well, thank you, everyone, for sharing. Um, and I think looking at some of these things for myself has made me become a very sensitive educator. And again, I've been doing this a very long time and could stop at any time, but have been renewed by this work. And so I always encourage anybody, to think about that and to just stay enthused. And again, this is a very dynamic group, and to continue being enthused with what we do really makes such a difference in young people's lives. And again, these are some of the other questions that we might want to think about for ourselves about: what do we believe? How do we act? How do we act in our day-to-day environments? Again, my athletes, they have such a hard time figuring out how old I am, because I act a certain way and I act different than a lot of people. So it's really important that they see a variety of people behaving in different ways, and it really helps them. And then again, for us, what are we going to do in 3, 5, 10 years? And how are we going to facilitate the change in our lives and in the goals of our lives? And again, it all intertwines together with what we're asking young people to do, and in terms of what we're doing for ourselves as well. Now, the other thing that we spent a lot of time, and we spend a lot of time with our basketball players, is community development. And it's really important for young people to feel a sense of belonging. And so this is the 10 principles of community development. And so some of them may seem very self-explanatory. And let me give you a couple of examples in some of them. And again, thinking about activities. And so that's what Success for Life is. Success for Life is developing the activities that go along with both of these principles. So whenever we're developing community, everybody, has to participate, and everybody has to buy in, from the coaching staff to the managers of the program. And I will say that I've worked with the basketball staff. I've been on the basketball staff for 4 years, and it really has taken a little bit of time for them to get used to some of these ideas, because these are very traditional coaches. You play, and you get better. And so my addition to the staff of 7, has really made a huge difference in what happens with our basketball players. And again, that goes into number 2, the ownership, the community ownership. If the head coach says, yeah, we're going to do this, then everybody follows in line. And so it's different depending on what your role is. And what I've seen is that I've been able to ask the basketball players to do so many more things than I ever thought I would be able to ask them to do. And that's because, we built this community, we built this family. And I just came from a meeting with them, and the head coach and they look at us as their parents. And so that's that's an amazing thing, that they say, oh, Coach Darnell and Ms. Hutch, they're like our parents. And not only at school or at basketball, but in life. And it's just a really wonderful, wonderful feeling. And so from this, the kids have been empowered. And this is the first year that I received texts from a couple of players who were like, I think I should have had more playing time. And they know I have nothing to do with the game. I have nothing to do with practice. I have nothing to do with the physical aspect of basketball. And I thought it was really brave of them, and they were really empowered to say, let me find somebody who I can say this to and who's going to help me. And I was just really, really taken aback when I got those texts from two different players, and help them to, to play better, to be better, and to be able to have a conversation with their coaches to find out why they don't play as much as they think they should play. And all of this is about lifelong learning. All of the skills that we work with our players are to be good people and to come to your institutions and be a part of the community and get a degree. That's always what we want for them. We want them to go and get their degree and to have a better life. And again, that was the conversation we just had with them. It's we check in on their grades all the time, and some were just not doing very well. So we had to, really figure out a plan. And, the head coach said, listen, we're not doing this for us. We're doing it for you. And we want you to do it for yourself because we have degrees, we have jobs, we have professions, we have money, and we want the same for you. And then also you have to do things that include everybody because, as we all know in sports, there are the great players, there are the medium players, and there are the not so good players. And so we have to include all of the kids to help the not so good players become better players. And I have seen this particular year, the kids are very sensitive and they've been so helpful with one another. And I think that is just an amazing, amazing. It's amazing because their personalities and their families, and then how they've been with us. So equity. We want everybody to be able to do their best, and everybody needs something a little bit different. Social action. This this also blew me away this year. One of the players came to me and said another player on the team didn't have a phone. And so they couldn't contact him to let him know when practice was or whatever. And he said to me, he's like, how can we get him a phone? He's like, I've talked to a couple people and we'll put up this amount of money and can we get him a phone? And we went through this whole thing and we're able to, help him to get a phone. We actually didn't have to get it for him, but we helped him to be able to do it on his own. But I was just so I was just so blown away that the kids noticed that, saw that, and wanted to help their player. So that was amazing. So that's like kind of the advocacy, and the networking piece of it again for sports is getting to know other players, other coaches, and our kids always are praised because they're well mannered, they're well dressed, and they carry themselves in a professional way when we go to tournaments, when we go to playoffs. And it's really an amazing thing to watch in these young people. Oh, okay, 5 minutes. Oh gosh. So that was those are some of the things we do to develop community. And I'm sure you have a plethora of things, but it is important to specifically develop community. I'm going to move along, got the 5-minute warning. So I do, this will probably be the last thing, but I do want to talk about the program. So Success for Life is a program that I did develop based on all of this information. And what I did is I divided it into 4 parts. For the first part is all about self-authorship. So it's all about asking those questions, those very, very difficult questions for high school students. So they can continue to think about those questions when they come to you. And so they're not going to be so shocked when you ask them these questions at your institution. The student-centered and self-directed projects, we've done some service learning. We've talked about some of the issues that the kids go through just day to day and come up with a little bit of a plan. The part 3 is the resilience, and that came up a lot, that kids need to be resilient. And so I incorporated yoga and meditation with the class that I taught, and it's a class of young men, and they love it. But also in terms of resilience, coming up with plans A, B, and C. So when something doesn't go the A way, it might go the B way, or it might go to the C way, so that the kids are thinking. So again, when they come to you, they're thinking critically, they're thinking ahead. And then the fourth part is self-awareness and self-advocacy. Again, that was the whole theme. Kids need to know, college freshmen need to know what they need help with, and then how to say that and to whom they should say that to. And that's why previously, in one of the previous slides, I asked, how are your institutions going to respond to my high school kids' needs? So that's how I divided the program. It can be all things can happen at one time. They can be in quarters. It really depends on the student. And because it is such a student-directed program, I always base it on the needs of the particular students. So that this conversation, well, this lecture that I was able to give you was to take the data, to take the information that I gathered, and then put it into something that would be concrete, so we can really help some of the kids. And again, one of my very caring colleagues, he came up with this quote, like, we care about our students' stories. And that is really what drives this work, is that when you do care about their story, then you can really build a relationship to help them. Oops, I'm sorry. And one of the key things that I've learned along the way is we have to ask why before how. So why is something the way it is before how can we change it, or how can we make it better, or how can we help? So as we start to shift, as I start this shift, you guys won't, but of developing high school student athletes, it's really going to benefit your institution and your institutions, because they will come to you and they're more mature. They'll be able to really fall into what it means to be a college student. And so I always want my athletes to play their sport, and I always want them to get a degree. And I want them to come to your institutions and be the best people that they can be. So thank you so much for joining me this this afternoon, it's my evening. I hope that we can continue this conversation, and I hope that somewhere along the way, as we create this new culture of high school student athletes, that you'll see a difference when they come to your institutions. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you again.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
And thanks, everybody.